If we wanted to take a picture of a snapshot of where the world is at the end of this year, it's not a particularly positive image, but it would be something like this. There's a general sense around us that something is going on, that things are not as they should be, and a lot of concern and issues around what that is and why it might be, and where the world is headed, what's it all about. And this is a picture of the world breaking up. For the last, all my lifetime essentially, we've been living in a paradigm which is about globalization. It's about the whole world working together since the two major world wars, in terms of never letting that happen again, building institutions like the United Nations, globalizing the world, not just politically but economically, and in all the ways that we can, to build the brotherhood of man, if you like, and work together for the greater good. And this has been a project which has been ongoing for many years. The European project is an example, all my lifetime, actually, and it's been proceeding very, very positively. There's been prosperity economically, for example, because of these things. But for one reason or another, very rapidly in actual fact, in the last couple of years, only in the last couple of years, this vision has started to crumble, started to break up. The first kind of shock of this idea came in, I hate to remind you of, which is Brexit, which happened only two years ago. This was the first result of nationalism. So this is the uprise of nationalism against the idea of globalization. Those two were always in tension as to whether we should work together or whether we should look after our own interests, and migration particularly has been the catalyst which has unleashed a lot of these nationalist feelings, and Brexit was an example of that. And as we know, this is about carving off or dividing Britain from Europe, starting to break up that vision in Europe. And across Europe, we're starting to see the uprise of some of these right-wing nationalist anarchists coming out onto the street. We've seen in Italy, even in Sweden, but here now in France, to speak out, to stand up against, particularly migration, in actual fact. But essentially, the idea is to look after your own interests and to make the division very clear. So this kind of earthquake, these kind of breaking up forces are very much in play as we reach the end of the year. The second force, of course, was in America. When President Trump came to power, he was not shy about saying exactly that. America first. It's time for us to look after our own interests, and he put a whole set of policies in place, including on migration, to close down the borders and to set up industry and trade on the basis of American interests alone, and to bring into power, into actual fact, isolationist policies, which is completely against the whole globalization vision that we've been talking about. And he said it and did it, and is doing it in a very dramatic and very bold way. As we finish the year, the government is now shut down in America because of a migration issue, because they won't let him put in budget money for his wall that he wants to build here to stop the South American and Central American people coming in from their desperation, because their economies are collapsing. And he's holding out on that issue, for example. So another example of the division and breaking up of our political world. And very much a bigger issue is US and China. So America is confronting China across the table on trade, for example, and this is a very big deal. It's about stopping and blocking all the goods, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods from coming into America, and putting tariffs on them. This is very much a part of my study, studying the flow of tin around the world, for example. It's massively disrupting the supply chains and seriously changing the way the world works on a trade basis. They're working at the moment on negotiations with a threat that in January he will raise the tariffs to 25%, for example. So this is a big deal. There's also a currency war going on between the US dollar and the yen, all sorts of divisions. There's also a lot of hardware in the South China Sea facing off America against China. So this is a big deal, and it's another example of the breaking up of globalization in a very big way indeed. Russia too is active and is agitating in every way it can to expand its influence and borders. Here in Ukraine is a Ukrainian general showing the deployment, massive build-up of Russian troops around the Ukrainian border. There's a serious possibility that Russia will invade Ukraine quite shortly, for example. So there's not another example of the world in the way it is as we close the year. Prophetically, this is extremely interesting because it fits into this whole idea, for example, of Nebuchadnezzar's image. So here is the big metal man from the beginning of time, all the different kingdoms of the world in a linear fashion, but also in another way of looking at this vision, the kingdoms of men standing up in defiance of God at the end times. And this is all of the kingdoms, all nations standing there defying God. And the point to notice particularly is the unstable nature of this statue. It's built on a foundation of iron and clay, which cannot mix. The weak and the strong do not mix. And for that reason, this image is unstable and will break up. And in fact, that is already happening. So we see here the people will not be a mixture and cannot or will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. So almost exactly, well, exactly the image and picture that we've just been discussing is portrayed in this vision, precisely. So the kingdom cannot unite together because the weak ultimately cannot mix with the strong, and migration is the big issue that has unlocked some of that, but it's also in terms of poverty and other issues that are starting to break the social divide, particularly in America, for example. So that vision is very important, and as we know, the vision goes on to say a stone will come out of the sky, which is the return of Jesus Christ to the world, and he will impact this image, and it will break up. So I suggest to you that we are already seeing this happening in our world. That is basically the part of this provision that we are already in. Prophecy is coming true right in front of our eyes. So we've also seen other destabilizing things that are worrying people. We've seen a lot of fire, for example, wildfires. We've seen floods, typhoons, to tsunamis. Everybody knows something's going on with the weather. And here is a chart from the BBC about climate change. And this is a seriously worrying issue that's concerning everyone. And it's to do with the increasing temperature of the world, to do with CO2 and other forces. And we can see that in this graph, the 10 warmest years at the top here, compared to the 20th century average here, have all been in the last decade, last 20 years. 2018 is here, as you can see already, 0.8 degrees above the 20th century average. The world is working the best it can to try and stop this happening. They are trying to stop this going above 2 degrees by 2050. At the moment, it's not heading anywhere well. It looks like we're at least heading for 3 degrees by 2050, if not more. And this is what you're seeing about electric vehicles and other measures that are trying to be put in place around the world to work together to stop this happening. But now what we've just seen, where the world is breaking up and refusing to cooperate, looking after its own interests, this is not working positively for this climate change either. And so we're starting to see some very difficult things ahead for this particular issue. That's why people are worried. Just hiding in the background here is an economic crisis as well. So here is the stocks and shares over the last decade. As you can see, this is the 2018 recession that we can see here. And the situation has been very positive, particularly because of China. The China engine has been driving the growth in the world. But just at the end of the year, as we're coming towards the end of the year, we're starting to see a sudden massive decrease. You see here lots of news about the stocks and shares starting to crumble. If any of you have got pensions, you should look at them. You'll find out that we are in a bit of a down, to say the least, at the moment. And from my study of China, from my work, we're starting to see some very, very seriously worrying negative growth rates in China, never been seen yet. So it's a China slowdown here that we're talking about. Irrespective of the trade war, we are headed for some serious financial issues as well. So all that combines together at the end of the year to make 2019 a very interesting year as we're going into it. But just for a moment, I want to focus on Israel and what's happening in the Middle East, because this is very much where we're at the moment. And in a very brief review now, I'm going to show you how some of the prophecies, particularly that one we just read, is very much in play, in intimate detail, and we are going to review that very briefly now. These are the prophecies, the background prophecies. Daniel 11 we know very well here, prophecies about the king of the north and the king of the south. This has always been the case throughout Israel's history. There have always been empires that are to the north and empires to the south. There's always been a conflict between them, and Israel has always been caught in the middle. this prophecy is no different. It's reflecting a time, at the time of the end, when the king of the north will attack the king of the south, and Israel will be caught up in that in a very difficult way. And we just read the prophecy from Ezekiel, which describes this in even more detail. So it describes the king of the north. It even describes who the king of the north people are, who are part of this composite king of the north. And all the different players have been listed in the passage we read, and we'll just look at them very briefly now. So the scripture says very clearly that at the time of the end, in this area to the north of Israel, in Syria and surrounding area, a confederacy, a group of nations will come, and they will be militant, and they will work together, and eventually they will attack Israel. That's what you just read, and that is exactly what has happened in the last 5 or 10 years precisely. So the Syrian war is a very complex war, and it's described very briefly here on this chart. The main reason why the nations have come together is partly because of the Arab Spring, partly because of the effect of that in terms of Assad and the rebels in Syria, but secondly, added on to that, the effect of ISIS, which you see there in black, was to build this supposed Islamic empire. So this drew in all the nations of the world to this arena. Probably there are all nations of the world, even China, are represented in this conflict. And so this is precisely what Scripture tells us, and this is the reason. This is a detail here that we have. Raqqa there was where this ISIS capital was. In yellow there we have, in orange there we have Turkey, who entered the fray from the north. Here we have the Kurdish forces in blue, supported by America, which were the main force to get rid of ISIS here. Here we see Russia intervening, coming in from a port in Latakia, bringing in a lot of hardware and support there. Here we see mainly Iran coming in from across here. So Iran has for many years wanted to occupy this territory, mainly to attack Israel, but has not been able to because Iraq is here. But it's used this opportunity to come through Iraq and to make this land bridge across here, linking up with Lebanese Hezbollah in this kind of arc here, transferring weapons and forces into this arena. Israel has tried to disrupt that and is still trying to do that, and America has tried to disrupt that coming in here. Just very briefly, a map of the dynamics of the war, but without going this in any detail, we can label these here roughly, if we take the ancient territories that we're talking about, something like this. This is very clear. Definitely Persia here, and this area is here. That's from our prophecy. And the territory of Tyre and Sidon from another prophecy very well fits the Lebanese aspect of this conflict. So we can go through that and put those labels on it. What we're seeing here is something very dramatic has happened in the last 2 weeks. So this whole presence of America in this area and here has stabilized this situation for quite a time. But now suddenly Trump has announced that he's pulling out, that he's coming out from here and here and leaving the territory completely for everyone else to carve up between them. And this is the very big news. It will make a very big difference to that dynamic and would allow Syria, Iran and Russia to build up their power now over the next few months to consolidate their position. And a lot of people are very, very concerned about that position. Here is the alliance in pictures. You can see quite clearly this grouping together, and here in a more recent picture too. So Russia's played a very clever game here and has been now finally got positions right up to the borders of Israel. This is something that Bible students have been looking for since, well, forever. They're bringing close of Russia, leading this confederacy to the borders of Israel, and that is what exactly you're looking at now in end of 2018. That has actually happened. And not only in one of the verses that we read there, it says, "Be thou a guard unto them." Did you see that? Well, this is exactly what's happening. So Russia have delivered this S-300 air missile system and has spread that air defence system right across the area, and to do exactly that, to prevent Israel, particularly from attacking the Confederacy while they build up their power. That is a headline from October. Nevertheless, Israel is still continuing to bomb the Iranian sites that are there and the Syrian sites. This is from the 26th of December. They made another attack which was not only condemned by Russia, but actually Russia threatened with Syria that if they do it again, they will actually fire these missiles into central Israel. So now you see this tension is growing very strongly, and we'll see that growing even further as we go into the new year. So this conflict is growing very fast, and will start to have a very serious impact in the next few months. So looking very briefly, Iran is determined to destroy Israel, as we can see here. Very interesting prophecy from Isaiah. Isaiah 21 talks about Elam. Elam is Iran, it's a territory in Iran. And it talks about the treacherous dealer who deals treacherously, which is really interesting in the context of the nuclear agreement, if you know that well, that's been holding Iran back for the last few years. And America has, as we know, has scrapped this deal, and now that has unlocked quite a lot of difficulties and tensions. America has also put on sanctions to Iran to prevent anyone buying Iranian oil. So this tension is very strong now, and Iran has started to build new missiles in defiance of that, and has also threatened to block oil supplies through the Red Sea if these sanctions take place, which they will. So we see that dynamic looking very threatening for the world economy and for stability in the Middle East, definitely, I would say. So Iran is spreading its influence and has been doing for many years, and this is reaching a climax now. So in fact, for example, Iran is repopulating Syria, so it's drafting in Muslims, Shia Muslims from Iraq into Syria. If we know this is a sectarian conflict between Sunni and Shia Muslims, north to south, so Iran is bringing in Shias to build its base in Syria, for example, something that they're doing to build their power. They're also agitating in the south. So here is an important dynamic in terms of our prophecies. We talked about the king of the south. So this conflict in Yemen, which is again another hangover from the Arab uprisings. We see here these Houthi fighters, the rebels, are backed by Iran, who've been delivering missiles to them, and they've been firing them into Saudi Arabia, into Riyadh. This conflict is agitated by Iran, and is quite an important dynamic that will, I think, have some very important prophetic outcomes soon. In terms of this dynamic, we've seen this news that the murder of Khashoggi here, which was a big deal, and by Saudi Arabia, and has significantly weakened Saudi Arabians' influence and power, and also America's ability to negotiate a peace deal with the Arab Israelis. That has also been knocked on the head by this event, and has strengthened Iranian gains in the area. So that was an important piece of news. So the Iranians are threatening the Saudi Arabians and others, and here is a headline from November that the Sisi, the president of Egypt, has said he will defend the Gulf. So he is prepared to fight Iran if necessary with Saudi Arabia. So you see these examples of the tensions building up very strongly between those two, exactly as prophecy predicted it would. So Iran is spreading its influence very strongly locally as well, and has for many years been fortifying Lebanon. So in Lebanon we have Hezbollah, which is a terrorist group committed to the destruction of Israel, and Iran, seeing them supporting their goal, has been building weapons and fortifications in Hezbollah for quite some years. Here is a visit made, this is made in February, the Iranian leader visiting the border to inspect the military positions, and here is his comment that during the tour, Raisi stated Jerusalem's liberation is near. So the objectives of the Iranians in this are very clear, very forthright. They are using this opportunity to build their power so they can destroy Israel. Here is the Lebanese military position, about 120,000 missiles now present in Lebanon, funded by Iran. Hezbollah, as I mentioned here, is the group they're working with. Very recent headline from October that they're now upgrading these missiles, sending GPS parts so that they can become more accurate. It's an example of the way that Iran is fortifying this position and what Israel is determined of trying to prevent happening. For example, they've dug some tunnels underneath this into the Galilee to provide a means where they can attack the north of Israel, and the IDF has been recently involved in an operation to close down those tunnels. It just gives an example of that conflict. But also on the seacoast down there in Gaza, Iranian support has been given to Hamas, who is the other terrorist organisation there, and they have been also digging tunnels, as you can see. They've also been firing rockets, and more recently have been massing on the border since March, actually, agitating here, throwing grenades, missiles across the border fence against Israel. This has been a very significant issue for the IDF. What they have not done is attacked and gone into Gaza. They've been under a lot of pressure to do that, to prevent this happening. But the problem they realise, that the reason they haven't done that is because they've got now two borders, two fronts to fight on. Fighting on the north and the south. And they don't want to be drawn into Gaza so that they're weakened on the north. And this is their dilemma at the moment. What is remarkable for Bible students is that this whole conflict we can portray on a map, of a Sunday school map of ancient Israel. So there's a prophecy in Psalm 83 which describes this confederacy of local nations that will attack Israel. Come, let us destroy Israel, as name may be remembered no more, is the theme of this Psalm 83 confederacy. And it's made up of different parts. All the nations are listed. Tyre and Sidon is specifically listed, and as is Philistia here. Some other nations here, the Edomites, the Moabites, essentially the modern day Jordanians. So we can see Israel surrounded by these enemies, and this has been their problem for some time. But this conflict now, supported by Iran, is coming to a head. In fact, the prophecy itself says specifically that Assyria, which is partly in Iran at least, will support this confederacy and provide its strength, and that is exactly what we've just described. What is remarkable is that in Isaiah chapter 9, there's a prophecy, this is Syria here, there's a prophecy which, verse 12, describes this situation in exact detail. So in Isaiah 9, Arameans, which are Syrians, the ancient enemies of Israel and Syria, Arameans from the east and Philistines from the west will devour Israel with an open mouth. So this is exactly the military situation that I've just described right now. That is precisely the dilemma of the IDF they're facing now, is this conflict that's described in Isaiah 9, absolutely. So that's what's happening, and that will come about. Here is a headline that just emphasises that. The IDF commando units are training for this two-front war in a 10-day drill recently in November. They're training on transitioning between north and southern fronts to fight both Hamas and Hezbollah at the same time. So I can show you that the headlines are precisely fitting the prophecies. So that is a brief review of the year and where we are today. So 2019 does look like on all these fronts a very interesting year as we go into the new year. If we had virtual reality glasses, we would like to look into the future and say, okay, well, what happens next? Well, that's another talk, of course. But if we wanted to summarise, it also would not be a very positive picture. The prophecies continue to describe the destruction and desolation of Israel and Jerusalem in particular. And some of our recent readings, in fact, from Zechariah, have just given this some of these dreadful prophecies. 2/3 will be struck down and perish, 1/3 will be left put into the fire, for example. Jerusalem will be destroyed, the next verse, Zechariah 14 says, and the people will go into exile. Foreigners, this is prophecy from Isaiah, Obadiah, entered his gates, they cast lots for Jerusalem. And this is a condemnation of the Palestinian people, the Jordanians particularly, who are voting over their brethren, for example. So this is just a couple of snapshots of what lies ahead. It's not that positive. If you read Zephaniah, the whole world will be consumed by the fire of God's jealous anger. Jesus is coming in judgment, as we must be aware of that. And he will be here, and eventually, in the end, the Lord will be king over all the earth for which we pray.